FuneReality, second act. The room was packed. The atmosphere was dense and choked, too warm, making everyone sweat. Someone, probably some good Samaritan, had decided to crank up the heat during the preparations, forgetting the fact that there would be dozens of people crammed in here eventually. Roland felt like he was inside a greenhouse. He could almost see wisps of steam escaping from his soaked-through clothing. When he looked over at Thorwald, he could swear his brother was grinning, dressed as lightly as he was. At the front of the room, a makeshift stage area had been set up. It was really just a speaking podium, next to which had been placed a picture of their mother, which they could not remember ever seeing. There was also a canvas and a projector, hooked up to a small laptop that was whirring and whining. It would be used later, probably in some sort of horrible, misguided slideshow. A man now walked up to the podium, carrying a few sheets of paper. He was dressed in a black suit that had quite probably been really expensive but did not quite fit his frame. He was almost 6'3" tall, the widest fake smile the brothers had ever seen, splitting his face like a wound. The pomade he had used to smooth down his few remaining hairs onto his balding head had evaporated in the choked atmosphere of the funeral room and ran in rivulets down the sides of his face. He looked more disheveled and out of place than either brother, yet he still carried himself like he owned the place. The brothers traded a look, unseen to the rest of the audience, just to confirm that neither one did not know who this person was. They could not remember ever seeing him or talking to him or their mother mentioning him. And yet, they both saw him immediately for who he was, a hateful little man. The speaker now cleared his throat, a gesture clearly meant to silence the general susurrus of murmuring and occasional laughter that was still floating through the room. Sweat and pomade mixed on his forehead, and he dabbed at it with a white handkerchief. In a very deliberate gesture, he took his glasses out of the inside pocket of his suit and put them on his nose. Then he cleared his throat again and began to speak. We are gathered here today to honor a great woman. She was a great wife, a great mother, a great widow, a great pillar of our community. She was loved by many, and she will be missed by more. I can see some young children in the audience, and while it reminds me that life does indeed go on, it also makes me sad to know that these young lives will never be touched by her the same way that we were. She was kind and compassionate, always on hand to support those in need. She carried herself with dignity and a certain pride that was not based on anything fleeting and exterior, but came from inside her. She knew that she had worth, and that showed. She was fiercely passionate, igniting all of us over and over again to make her join in whatever she felt necessary to do. I know that we all want to grieve, want to tear our hair and gnash our teeth at the passing of this wonderful battleship of a woman, but she would not want that. Oh no, if she could see us now all gathered here, all dressed in black and in somber moods, she would most certainly want us to stop being ridiculous and get on with it. And get on with it we shall, because even if I was the one who organized the funeral and invited most of you here, even if I was the one who spent probably the most time with her out of all of us here, despite not even being related to her, her sons did show up to honor their mother and to see her off. So of course, they both decided that for a proper send-off, they would need to say a few words. And I am sure that their words will be much more fitting than mine could ever hope to be, coming from a place not just of love, but of filial duty. The speaker went off the podium and mentioned to Ronald and Thorwald to get upstairs. They still did not know who he was, but he seemed to be important somehow. Frustratingly, he had forgone to introduce himself, focusing instead on their mother. How had he known her? Why was he thinking he was in charge of the funeral? Had he really set it up? Both brothers racked their brains, trying to remember who had invited them and coming up short. Maybe it had been this guy. It took them only a few seconds, but there still was a noticeable wave of disapproval coming from the crowd behind them, so they both got up off their seats and made to move towards the front of the room. They traded another look now, this one not as stealthy, accompanied by slight hand gestures, each one wanting the other one to go first. With that strange telepathy that siblings share, no matter how estranged they are, they both realized two things. That they both had forgotten to bring their prepared speeches, and that they both hated everyone in attendance and would rather grieve in peace. So they stood up simultaneously, walking up to the podium, ready to deliver a combined speech. There was a certain crackling energy now between them, something they had not felt in a long while, an understanding that transcended the need for communication, that worked on another, deeper level. As they walked a few steps to the podium, they realized that they were inhabiting the FuneReality, the world without their mother, and that they only had each other for support and comfort. In time, this feeling would pass. In time, the old wounds would reopen, the old gripes resurface, but for the moment, all was forgotten. Roland admired his brother for the way he dressed, a way their mother would not have approved in that theatric manner of hers that showed how much he approved really. Thorwald pitied his brother for the way his clothing had given up on him and was reminded of how their mother would have made Roland still feel like the sharpest dressed man around. They both felt the disapproving looks of whoever the fuck was in attendance, but in the FuneReality, these looks got lost in the void, burned up in dark flames, only served to fuel the ever-growing darkness within them. They turned around, mentally if not physically linking hands, and began their speech. It was unrehearsed and not prepared, running only on the dark energy that seemed to have replaced all their emotions, all their thoughts. They took turns speaking, but the gaps were so slim, their voices so similar, that it was as if only one voice spake, with a fierce passion and radiating an anger that was directed at everything and nothing, at the speaker as well as all the guests. And sometimes the voice rose, got amplified to become a thunderous roar, when the two brothers, linked by the strange energies of the FuneReality, spoke in unison. Thank you. Thank you all for attending, and thank you especially for those words you said about our mother. She was, as has been pointed out, a great woman, a wonderful woman, even an awesome woman in the old sense of the word, an awesome woman. Her passing, our mother's passing, has ripped a hole into reality, a hole shaped like her which can never again be filled. Her passing, our mother's passing, has opened a rift in reality, a bleeding gash right in the middle of the world. The entire world has made a step to the left, leaving us behind in this world without our mother, while all of you simply have moved on. There should be wailing and gnashing of teeth, not just for her sake, the sake of our mother, but also for our sake, for all your sakes. You don't even know, you can't even understand what you have lost in her. She was not just a pillar of your useless community and a great mother and wife. These are all empty phrases, and our mother hated empty phrases. Meaningless drivel only spewed forth to fill the silence you cannot bear. She could bear the silence, turn it into a comfortable blanket. She understood the value of listening and of caressing. And even when every touch cut like a knife and every word stung like a blow to the face, hers never did. And she had so much love to give. Our mother had so much love to give. Maybe too much love even. Maybe she should have kept some to herself. Maybe then the darkness would not have claimed her. Maybe she should have kept some to herself instead of giving it all to us and then wasting the rest on you people. tearing herself down piece by piece by piece to feed your rotting carcasses. Like the pelican, she used her own lifeblood to keep us and you alive. She made us who we are. We owe her everything. And despite what you may think, you hateful little man, we loved her deeply and fiercely and in ways you cannot even begin to understand. Because you are empty and vacuous, and frankly, you are a waste of space. And we wish nothing more than for you to be lying there and for her to be still alive. We would give every single one of you for just 5 minutes more with her, to tell her how much we love her, to tell her how sorry we are. And she would just smile in that way of hers, and she would say nothing, and she would touch your cheeks, wiping away the tears, and it would all be all right. It would all be all right again. They both fell into themselves at that point. They fell into the vast, ever-expanding emptiness inside them that had swallowed all their feelings, all their thoughts. They fell into the endless blackness of the void that was shaped like their mother. They fell into the rift, the bleeding gash. They fell for what seemed like forever. For the attendants of the funeral service, of course, they simply fell to their knees at this point, hands clutching at the sides of their heads, choking, sobbing sounds deep in their throats, as a pain that was too big to exist tried to break free but stay locked inside their throats. It felt like it took hours, but it took all of 5 seconds before both brothers got up and left the podium, one going left and one going right, trying to put as much distance as possible between them. They marched down the hall fast and purposefully. Only their footsteps were audible, amplified and loud, sounding like nails hammered in a coffin like distant gunshots. Roland and Thorwald did not look at each other, almost aggressively avoiding each other's eyes. The room had only one double door at the end of the hall, and they made a point of each opening one of the door's wings and stepping through the respective hole before taking off in opposite directions. The door banged shut like the door of a crypt. The hateful little man stood up and clapped his palms together, an unnecessarily loud gesture that startled everyone, drew their attention away from the darkness that had begun to congregate at the corners of the room, at the shadows that seemed to have been left behind by the brothers. Well, that went about as well as expected. What do you say? Shall we get on with it so that we can then move on to the wake? But what about her sons? Someone whispered, more to themselves as to the general room, but in the strange atmosphere of the room, it seemed as if they had screamed. They will be all right. Don't worry about them. It is typical of them to try and hog all the attention, to not think of their mother even if she's dead. It is sad, yes, but typical nonetheless. It was a mistake to invite them, but what can you do? In any case, I think we had some music prepared in the slideshow to celebrate and honor the deceased, and I feel we should take a look at that now. And with that, the slideshow started, showing hand-picked scenes from the lives of the dead woman, painting her in muted, somber colors, evoking the chuckles and the yes, as expected of a nostalgic trip down memory lane at the graveside, but utterly failing to capture anything of substance. Roland would have called it the next act in the play. Thorwald would have referred to the automatons going through their motions. Whatever the case, all attention was on the pictures, the few sanitized and approved memories people were allowed to retain. There was no wailing, no gnashing of teeth. There was a sort of bored complacency coming over the crowd now as picture after picture after picture was shown, briefly discussed and then discarded, as if the dead woman was broken into pieces to easier dispose of.